A heavy rain slicked the streets of Mayfair, its rhythm tapping against the tall windows of Lady Evelyn Marchmont's townhouse. Inside, velvet curtains stirred faintly with the draft of an open door. The butler's cry rang out in horror. Lady Evelyn lay slumped in her armchair, her jeweled fan fallen at her side. The fan, delicate, hand-painted with peacocks and blossoms, seemed absurd beside the lifeless pallor of her face. Within the hour, Hercule Poirot, summoned by a shaken Inspector Japp, would arrive, and he would notice at once that the fan was not merely an ornament, but a weapon. Chapter 1. The Painted Death. The rain came down hard that night, a gray London curtain that blurred the lamps along Grosvenor Square and turned the cobbled streets into shallow, gleaming rivers. The townhouse of Lady Evelyn Marchmont stood resolute against the storm, tall, elegant, with its stone facade streaked by water and its brass knocker gleaming faintly in the gaslight. Yet within its drawing room, death had silenced the usual chatter of privilege and gossip. The butler, trembling, had been the first to discover her. He had gone to close the windows against the storm when he saw her figure slumped in the great velvet armchair by the fire. At first he thought she slept. Lady Evelyn was fond of her late evenings, sitting with her brandy and her painted fan, pretending she was in Venice or Vienna instead of damp, dreary London. But as he approached, the brandy glass slipped from her lax hand and shattered on the hearth, and the butler, stoic old Mr. Cray, uttered a cry that sent the servants running. She was dead. The physician summoned to the scene. A brisk man named Dr. Harcourt had muttered something about heart failure. He had seen it often enough. Elderly ladies, indulgent with spirits, overtaken suddenly in their comfortable chairs. But something in the scene was wrong. The servants whispered it. The housekeeper crossed herself and muttered about omens. For the fallen object it lay detestable. But the crime, it does not wait for fine weather, and Japp grunted. I wouldn't call it a crime yet, Poirot. Looks like the old girl's ticker just gave out. Poirot advanced to the armchair, his eyes bright, his head tilted as if listening to music only he could hear. Perhaps, yes. But perhaps, non. He bent close, not touching, merely observing. The firelight gleamed upon Lady Evelyn's rings, upon the fine lace at her cuffs, and upon the pallor of her cheek. Poirot's gaze moved to the fan upon the carpet. He crouched, daintily, carefully, and regarded it as though it were an artifact in a museum. You see this fan, Inspector? It is most beautiful, n'est-ce pas? The workmanship, it is delicate. But also... He leaned closer, his nostrils flared. There is a scent, very faint. Not perfume, something acrid, chemical. Japp frowned. All I smell is smoke from the grate. Poirot shook his head. Ah, but you do not have the nose of Hercule Poirot. He lifted his eyebrows. This fan, it glistens. See there, on the ivory ribs, a residue. Invisible almost, but it catches the light. A varnish. Or... His voice dropped. A poison. The servants gasped. Japp muttered something unprintable under his breath. You think someone smeared poison on her fan? Poirot rose, smoothing his cuffs. I think nothing yet. I only observe. But this fan, it lies not far from the hand of Lady Evelyn, and I, Hercule Poirot, say it must not be touched further. It shall go to the laboratory. Japp scowled. Always your poisons, Poirot. You see them everywhere. Poirot inclined his head. And how often am I correct, mon ami? The inspector had no reply. He tugged at his mustache, a poor bristling thing compared with Poirot's impeccable specimen, and signaled to his constable. All right, bag it, carefully. At the next. Poirot nodded gravely. She played with their hearts, perhaps, with their fortunes. There was silence. The servants exchanged glances. Poirot read it as clearly as print. Ah, yes. There was resentment in this house. Jealousy, perhaps hatred. Lady Evelyn had ruled her domain with charm and cruelty both. Such rulers, Poirot knew, gathered enemies like dust. Japp interrupted his thoughts. If this is murder, Poirot, it's a devilishly subtle one. No marks on her, no struggle. Just sitting there, quiet as you please, then gone. Exactement, said Poirot softly. And that is what is so curious. The subtle crime, it leaves the most obvious trace, if one knows where to look. Already, I see much. Japp eyed him suspiciously. You always do. Poirot gave a little bow. It is the burden of genius. He turned once more to the body. Lady Evelyn Marchmont, he murmured, as though addressing her. Who has done this to you? Who has transformed your fan, your little toy, into the wing of death? The fire crackled. The rain beat against the panes. Somewhere in the distance a clock struck midnight, and Poirot, straightening, announced in a tone that chilled even Inspector Japp. This, my friend, is not the end of Lady Evelyn's story. It is only the beginning. Chapter 2. The Nephew's Inheritance. Morning broke reluctantly over London, as though the city itself disapproved of the events of the night before. A pallid light filtered through clouds heavy with rain, glimmering on wet cobblestones. The Marchmont townhouse bore the hush of morning. Curtains were drawn, the brass knocker muffled in crape, and the staff went about their duties in solemn whispers. Hercule Poirot had returned early, immaculate as ever, every button fastened and mustache in perfect symmetry. You know, we dined often, well, from time to time. She was generous, in her way. Japp raised a brow. Generous, was she? Didn't she hold the purse strings rather tight? Henry colored slightly. She had her little eccentricities, but she always intended to provide for me. Why, only last week she said she meant to sign the new will. I was to inherit everything, at last. Poirot tilted his head. Ah, oui, the will. But alas, it was not signed, was it? Henry faltered. Well, no. She delayed. She always delayed. But she promised. It was as good as done. Poirot's gaze sharpened. Promises, monsieur, are not the same as signatures. Henry's handkerchief twisted between his fingers. She owed me that much. I've stood by her, tolerated her whims. It was understood. Perhaps, Poirot said softly. Or perhaps she enjoyed holding your hopes in her hand, like a cat with a mouse. Henry gave a short laugh, brittle. You speak rather unkindly, monsieur. I speak only of what I observe, said Poirot, his tone mild. Japp cut in briskly. Mr. Ashworth, where were you last night? Henry looked startled. Why, at my club, of course. I dined there, stayed late. Ask anyone. I didn't hear the news until this morning. Which club? The Albany, Henry replied quickly. I have many acquaintances there who will vouch for me. Poirot made a small note in his pocketbook. And tell me, monsieur, when you saw your aunt last? Henry hesitated. 3 days ago. We dined here, in this very room. His eyes flickered briefly toward the empty chair. She was, herself, sharp as ever. We quarreled, perhaps, but it was nothing. Families quarrel, do they not? Poirot's eyes narrowed slightly. Over what did you quarrel, monsieur? Henry's voice grew defensive. Oh, trifles. She accused me of extravagance. As though one can live in London without spending a little freely. Door behind him. Poirot, without hesitation, glided to the corridor. He bent his head, mustaches quivering, and caught the faint murmur of Henry's voice beyond the door. Yes, I know, Henry was saying urgently. But it must be destroyed, at once. Do you understand? If they find it, we're finished. Poirot's eyes gleamed. He tiptoed back to the drawing room, smoothing his cuffs just as Henry reappeared, composure regained. Just business, Henry said airily. A matter of stocks. You know how it is. Poirot bowed, but his eyes never left Henry's. Ah, oui. Stocks. They can be very dangerous, monsieur. One touch and everything collapses. Henry forced a laugh. Quite so. But Poirot knew, with the certainty of the little gray cells, that Henry Ashworth's stocks were not the kind traded in the exchange, and that his words, "It must be destroyed, at once," would prove most illuminating. Chapter 3. The Companion's Burden. The drawing room had been set to rights, but a hush still hung in the Marchmont house, a hush that seemed heavier than morning. The storm had passed in the night, yet the air lingered damp, oppressive, as though the house itself resented the intrusion of death within its walls. Hercule Poirot and Inspector Japp sat together at the long mahogany table, where Lady Evelyn's correspondence lay in neat stacks. Papers fluttered faintly in the draught, though the windows were firmly closed. A fire burned low in the grate, but its glow did little to banish the sense of disquiet. The door opened quietly, and Clara Bellamy entered. She was not young, 40 at least, with tired eyes and a complexion worn by years of service. She wore a plain black gown, unbecoming, though carefully tended. Her manner was composed, but her hands trembled as she clasped them before her. "This is Miss Clara Bellamy," announced the butler stiffly. He withdrew, leaving her with the detectives. Poirot rose, bowing. "Mademoiselle, my condolences. You were companion to Lady Evelyn, were you not?" "Yes," Clara said softly. "Life. But it was mine." "Until last week," Poirot murmured, her head jerked up. "What do you mean?" Poirot's eyes were very steady. "Lady Evelyn had spoken of dismissing you, is that not so?" Clara's composure faltered. A flush crept into her cheeks. "Who told you that?" "The walls of a house, mademoiselle. They have ears. It is known. Clara swallowed. She was angry. She said things. She often threatened dismissal, but she never carried it out. She liked having someone always at hand. Poirot said nothing. The silence drew words from her unwilling lips. She said she would put me out. With nothing, Clara whispered. She laughed as she said it. I begged her. I wept. But she only mocked me. Jap scribbled in his notebook. So you had every reason to resent her. Clara's hands clenched. I resented her, yes. But I did not kill her. Poirot's voice was soft. Tell me, mademoiselle, did Lady Evelyn write much in her last days? Clara blinked. She was always writing. Letters to friends, to lawyers, to artists, even to the newspapers sometimes. She dictated. I wrote. That was part of my duty. Poirot drifted toward the fireplace. He prodded the ashes with the poker, and a charred scrap came loose. He bent delicately, lifting it. A fragment of paper, edges blackened, but legible in part. My decision final. You shall not. Fortune instead, too. Poirot held it up. You see, Inspector? A letter, half-burned. Someone sought to destroy it. But not completely. Clara stared, stricken. Poirot's eyes went to her cuffs. Ink stains marked the edge of her sleeve. Ah, and here, he said softly. A clue that tells its own tale. Clara flushed crimson. Yes, I wrote it. At her dictation. But she made me burn it. She changed her mind, as she always did. She said the letter was nonsense, and ordered me to throw it in the fire. Poirot's voice was very calm. Had cause to hate her. But I also depended on her. If she died, what became of me? I had no wish for her death. Jap muttered. Plenty of motive, though. Dismissal on one hand, inheritance on the other. Damned convenient. Poirot's gaze lingered on the ink stains, the half-burned letter, the trembling woman before him. His voice, when he spoke, was grave. Convenient, yes. But life, Inspector, is rarely so simple. He set the letter fragment gently upon the table, smoothing its scorched edge. His eyes glittered with thought. Still, he murmured, almost to himself, the ink upon her cuff, the ashes in the grate. They speak to me. They tell me this. Lady Evelyn played a dangerous game with her will, and Mademoiselle Clara, she was caught in its snare. Clara lifted her face, pale, pleading. You must believe me. I did not kill her. Poirot bowed slightly. I believe nothing, mademoiselle. I only observe. And what I observe is troubling. The clock chimed the hour. Outside, a carriage rattled by. Within the somber house, Poirot's little gray cells stirred, assembling their silent puzzle. And Clara Bellamy sat trembling in her chair, the ink upon her cuff betraying more than her words could hide. Poirot adjusted his cuffs, eyes fixed upon Clara. Inspector, he said softly, keep your eyes upon Mademoiselle Bellamy. For I fancy she knows more of Lady Evelyn's final hour than she admits. And as Clara gave a faint gasp, Poirot bent to retrieve the charred letter once more. Against its scorched edge, the ink on her sleeve was a perfect match. Chapter 4. The physician's secret. The morning was clearer. The storm of the night before swept away, leaving London glistening as though freshly polished. Yet inside Lady Evelyn Marchmont's house the shadows remained thick. A house in mourning wears its silence like a shroud, and no light can penetrate the weight to lose her so suddenly. He shook his head, but alas, it was inevitable. The heart, gentlemen, does not last forever. Poirot's eyes twinkled. So, you believe she died naturally, Doctor? Of course. Harcourt's tone was firm. She had complained of palpitations. She was elderly, fond of brandy. A seizure during the storm, most likely. Jap grunted. That's what you wrote on the certificate. Natural causes. Because it was natural. Harcourt said smoothly. Poirot tilted his head. And yet, Doctor, Lady Evelyn was vigorous, was she not? Her servants speak of her strength, her sharpness of wit. Do you not find it odd that such a one should die, so suddenly? Harcourt's lips tightened. Old age takes no account of vigor, Monsieur Poirot. A vessel bursts, the heart falters. It is the way of things. Poirot studied him closely. A bead of sweat glistened on Harcourt's temple, though the library was cool. Perhaps. And yet, tell me, Doctor, you warned Lady Evelyn recently of, how do you say, toxic vapors? Harcourt started. Who told you that? Poirot spread his hands. One hears things. The servants, they remember. The physician forced a laugh. A mere precaution. She was fond of exotic perfumes, paints, and lacquers. Some contain harmful substances. I merely advised her not to inhale too deeply. That is all. Poirot's eyes gleamed. How very interesting. You spoke of poison before she died, and now she is dead, and I, Hercule Poirot, detect poison upon her fan. Harcourt flushed. Are you accusing me of murder? Non, non, Poirot said quickly, spreading his hands in a gesture of peace. I accuse no one. I merely observe curious coincidences. Jap stepped forward. What about these sums of money then, Doctor? We've learned Lady Evelyn made you certain payments. Quite large ones. Harcourt stiffened. Investments, Inspector. Perfectly respectable. I am funding medical research, treatments for respiratory. I was her doctor, her advisor, her friend. Her friend, Poirot repeated softly. And perhaps more. The intimacy of money, eh, Inspector? It binds as strongly as blood. Jap gave a low whistle. Plenty of motive there. If the lady cut off his funding. Harcourt's composure cracked. She would not have. She valued my work. She was proud to be associated with it. Poirot studied him, noting the sheen of sweat, the clenched hands, the two bright eyes. Then he said gently, Doctor, I tell you something you know already. The dead, they cannot speak. But the objects, they do. The fan, it speaks. And it says, I was made deadly by the hand of one who understood such things. Harcourt's breath caught, but he forced a smile. You have a flair for drama, Monsieur Poirot. I deal in medicine, not melodrama. Poirot bowed slightly. And yet, Doctor, melodrama may kill as surely as medicine heals. The silence stretched. The fire crackled faintly in the grate. Then, from the doorway, the maid's voice trembled. Beg pardon, sirs, but I remember something. The night before she died, Lady Evelyn said Dr. Harcourt warned her again. Beware the vapors, he told her. She laughed at him, said she would die in her own way. She was holding her fan when she said it. Poirot turned slowly back to the physician. Beware the vapors, he repeated softly. How prophetic, mon cher docteur. How very prophetic. Harcourt's face was white. Poirot adjusted his cuffs, his eyes gleaming. Inspector, we must keep a close watch on this man. For though he speaks of health, I fear he knows death far too well. As Harcourt departed stiffly, Poirot bent to the receipt once more, running a finger along the faded ink. Hydrocyanic acid, he murmured. One breath, and all is finished. And yet, it was not this poison upon the fan. No, no. Something more subtle. But Dr. Harcourt, he would... Chapter 5. The Artist and Her Fan. London's fog had rolled in early, softening the lamplight, turning the city into a blurred watercolor. Poirot, drawing his cloak tighter, followed Inspector Japp down a crooked street in Bloomsbury, where the windows glowed with the warm, flickering light of artists' studios. From within came the faint strains of a violin, the smell of turpentine, and the muffled voices of bohemian life. Our next bird, Japp muttered, is a French one. Yvette Rousseau. Painted the fan, didn't she? Funny trade, painting trinkets for old ladies. Not funny, mon ami, Poirot corrected softly. Art, in all its forms, is never trivial. And yet, art can kill as well as delight. Japp shot him a look. You really think this artist had a hand in it? Poirot's mustache twitched. I think, my good Japp, that the brush may sometimes be as dangerous as the dagger. The butler had given them her address. A tall, narrow building whose upper floors served as ateliers for artists and craftsmen. They climbed the creaking stairs until they reached a door painted a brilliant vermilion. On it, in looping hand, was written, Yvette Rousseau, peintre. Poirot knocked. After a moment, the door swung open, and there she was. Yvette Rousseau was in her late 20s, dark-haired, with eyes of startling green. She wore a loose robe spattered with pigments, her hands still stained from her work. The studio behind her was a chaos of canvases, oriental screens, Japanese fans, and bright silks draped carelessly over chairs. A large easel stood near the window, a half-finished portrait glowing in the pale afternoon light. Monsieur, she said, her voice low and melodious, tinged with the cadence of Paris. Poirot bowed deeply. Mademoiselle Rousseau, forgive our intrusion. We come upon a matter most grave. Lady Evelyn Marchmont, your patroness, is dead. Her eyes widened, and she pressed her paint-stained fingers to her lips. Mon Dieu! Lady Evelyn! Dead? But how? Ah, then she dictated the materials? Yes. Yvette hesitated, then burst out. She insisted on certain pigments, old recipes, strange powders. I told her they were dangerous. Arsenic, lead, vermilion ground with mercury. But she laughed, said her ancestors had used such colors and survived. She wanted brilliance, brilliance at any cost. Japp whistled. So she wanted poison on her own fan. Not poison, Yvette cried. Artistry. The colors are vivid but toxic only in large quantities. A little contact would not kill. Poirot lifted a brow. Would it not, mademoiselle? Perhaps in a single touch, no. But repeated, close to the lips, inhaled. Ah, that is another matter. Yvette's hands trembled. You cannot mean I am responsible. Poirot's voice was soft. I mean only that art may carry death unawares. And yet, I do not think Lady Evelyn ordered her own destruction. He moved slowly about the studio, studying the clutter. Fans lay scattered, some painted with birds, some with flowers, others unfinished, their ivory ribs bare. He bent over one, noting a faint iridescence upon the surface. This paint, mademoiselle. It has the sheen of arsenic green, n'est-ce pas? Yvette's chin lifted proudly. Yes, it was Lady Evelyn's favorite color. She said it reminded her of her youth in Venice. It is dangerous, but beautiful. Poirot touched the bristles of a brush lying nearby. A smear of dried pigment clung there, precisely the shade he had seen upon Lady Evelyn's fan. He slipped the brush back, his mustaches twitching. Tell me, mademoiselle, he said, did Lady Evelyn ever quarrel with you? Yvette flushed. Quarrel? No. She was difficult, yes, imperious, condescending. She treated me as an exotic pet, a little French curiosity. But she paid well, and she admired my talent. Without her patronage, I should still be painting cheap portraits in Montmartre. Poirot studied her intently. Names whispered danger. He picked up one. Cinnabar, HGS. Mercury sulfide, he murmured, deadly in careless hands. Yvette snatched it away. I use it with care. Poirot inclined his head. But if another used it, with malice, if someone, knowing Lady Evelyn's fondness for the fan, placed upon it a powder invisible, subtle, lethal, Yvette's face drained of color. You mean someone tampered with my work? Poirot said nothing. He merely studied her with those sharp little eyes, watching the flicker of fear cross her features. She whispered, Then I am ruined. Who will buy from me now if they believe my fans bring death? Poirot's voice softened. Courage, mademoiselle. Truth, it has a way of emerging. And I, Hercule Poirot, will see it does so. There was a pause. Outside, the violin had ceased, and the silence pressed in heavy. Japp shifted uncomfortably, tapping his notebook. Poirot turned once more to Yvette. One last question. When you delivered the fan, did anyone else see it? Touch it? Yvette frowned, thinking. Yes, now I recall. Lady Evelyn's maid was present, and Dr. Harcourt. He examined it closely, asked about the pigments. He seemed fascinated. Lady Evelyn teased him, said he was more curious about her fan than about her health. Poirot's eyes gleamed. Très intéressant, he bowed. Merci, Mademoiselle Rousseau. You have been most helpful. As they left, Yvette sank into a chair, burying her face in her paint-stained hands. On the street outside, Japp muttered, Well, she's got enough poisons in there to kill a regiment. If you ask me, she's our woman. Poirot adjusted his gloves, looking up at the fog-shrouded sky. Non, mon ami. She is guilty only of art, and of pride. But the fan, it was touched by others. The doctor, perhaps. The maid. Always we return to the fan, and to the hand that turned beauty into death. Down. I assume this is about my aunt? Poirot inclined his head. Just so, Sir Reginald. We regret to intrude upon your leisure, but her death, It is not without questions. Reginald's eyes narrowed. Questions? She was an old woman. Surely her heart gave out. Poirot's mustaches twitched. Alas, it seems more complicated. The fan she cherished, it bore poison. For a moment, Reginald's mask slipped and surprise flashed across his features. Then he laughed, short and hard. Poison? On a fan? Preposterous. Not so preposterous, Japp said bluntly. And you, Sir Reginald, stood to gain a fortune from her death, didn't you? Reginald's face darkened. Are you suggesting I killed my own aunt? Just pointing out motive, Japp said. You were her heir, weren't you? Her principal heir, yes, Reginald admitted with forced calm. Though she had a perverse fondness for making threats, disinheritance was her favorite weapon. But she never meant it. It was simply her way of maintaining control. Poirot leaned forward, his voice gentle. And yet, Sir Reginald, the night before she died, she spoke of altering her will. Reginald's fingers drummed the arm of his chair. Nonsense. She would never cut me off. Poirot's gaze dropped, almost idly, to Reginald's breast pocket. A corner of singed paper peeked out. Lady Evelyn's distinctive handwriting unmistakable. Poirot said softly, You have there, perhaps, a letter from her? Reginald stiffened, then removed it with a careless gesture. An old note. She was always writing to me about trifles. Poirot's eyes gleamed. Even trifles, they may be instructive. Reluctantly, Reginald unfolded the half-burned sheet. In Lady Evelyn's strong hand, one line was still legible. Your allowance will cease at once if you continue. The rest was charred. Japp gave a low whistle. Looks like she was cutting you off, all right. Reginald's jaw. Evelyn's indulgence. They had more motive than I. Poirot's eyes twinkled. And yet you resent them, eh? I resent anyone who fed upon her generosity, Reginald snapped. She should have left such parasites to starve. But she was always contrary. Poirot leaned back, folding his hands. Tell me, Sir Reginald, did you know that the fan was painted with pigments most toxic? I know nothing of pigments, Reginald said curtly. I only know that my aunt liked her toys. If she chose foolishly, it was her own doing. Poirot's gaze lingered. So indifferent you sound, for one who has just lost his benefactress. Something flickered in Reginald's eyes, then hardened. Lady Evelyn was formidable. She commanded respect, not affection. I mourn her as one mourns a monarch, not as a relative. The silence hung heavy. Poirot studied him, weighing each word, each gesture. The arrogance, the calculation, the flashes of genuine resentment. Then he rose, brushing an invisible speck from his sleeve. Sir Reginald, he said softly, inheritance is a dangerous thing. It tempts, it corrupts, it destroys. And the dead, they may reach from the grave to strike down the ungrateful. Take care. Reginald rose as well, his smile cold. Do not waste your little sermons on me, Poirot. I did not kill her. And soon enough the estate will prove my innocence. Poirot's eyes gleamed. Ah, the estate, the will. It is always the will. We must examine it very closely, mon ami. Very closely indeed. As they departed the club, Jap muttered, "He's as slippery as an eel. But if you ask me, he's our man." No one had more to gain. Poirot paused on the steps, gazing thoughtfully at the fog-shrouded street. Perhaps. And yet, my friend, the truth. It does not lie only in what is gained, but in what is feared to be lost. Lady Evelyn's money, her patronage, her secrets, they bound many lives together. "Wish to see me, gentlemen?" she asked softly. Poirot bowed. "Mademoiselle Whitfield, forgive us for troubling you. But in such a case, every observation may prove of the greatest importance." She inclined her head. "I'll tell you what I can. Her ladyship. She was everything to me. I should like to see her memory cleared of this horror." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "Ah, you were devoted, yes?" Clara's voice softened. "I served her for 12 years. She could be sharp-tongued, demanding, but she was kind to me in her way. She trusted me with her private affairs." "Private affairs?" Jap pounced. "Like what?" Clara hesitated. "Her letters, her medicines, her keys." Poirot leaned forward gently. "Keys, mademoiselle? To what?" "To the drawers in her study," Clara admitted. "She kept papers there, bills, correspondence, her will." Poirot's mustaches twitched. "And on the night of her death?" Clara's eyes darted nervously. She went to the study after dinner. I followed with her shawl, for it was chilly. I saw her unlock the drawer and take out a packet of papers. She seemed agitated. She told me to leave her. I did not see what she did with them afterward." Jap leaned back. "Papers, eh? Likely her will." Poirot nodded slowly. "And after that, mademoiselle, what occurred?" Clara clasped her hands tighter. "Later, when I brought her fan, she was calmer. She sat by the fire, tapping it against her chin as she always did. Dr. Harcourt was with her then. He had called unexpectedly. I saw him take the fan from her hand, examining the painting, asking about the colors. She laughed, told him to be careful not to smudge it. Then I was dismissed." Poirot's eyes sharpened. "You are certain of this, mademoiselle? Dr. Harcourt held the fan?" "Yes, monsieur. For several moments. Should not have kept it, but I could not bring myself to destroy it. Perhaps it is nothing. Perhaps it is everything." Poirot unfolded it carefully. The fragment bore Lady Evelyn's unmistakable hand. The new will must be signed at once. Certain parties must not benefit further. Reginald, Harcourt. I will see justice done." Poirot's eyes glittered. "Mon Dieu." Jap whistled low. So she was cutting them both out. Clara's voice shook. "I was afraid what it might mean. That is why I said nothing." Poirot folded the paper, tucking it neatly away. "You were wise, mademoiselle. But silence can be as deadly as poison. This is most illuminating." Clara whispered, Do you think one of them killed her?" Poirot did not answer directly. "I think, mademoiselle, that Lady Evelyn Marchmont died because of what she knew, and what she intended to do. The fan, It is only the weapon. The motive lies here, in her own words. The silence thickened. The ticking of the mantel clock sounded like the march of destiny. Poirot rose, adjusting his cuffs with precision. Mademoiselle Whitfield, you have done well. You have honored your mistress more than you know. But remember, truth once spoken cannot be recalled. Be brave. She bowed her head, tears glistening in her eyes. I only want justice for her, monsieur. Poirot's voice was grave. Justice, mademoiselle, is exactly what we shall have. As Poirot and Japp stepped into the hall, Japp muttered, That tears it. Both Harcourt and Reginald had the rug pulled out from under them. Motive enough for 2 murders. Poirot's eyes gleamed, mustaches bristling. Ah yes, mon ami. But only one hand touched the fan with knowledge enough to turn beauty into death. Which hand? That is the riddle. He paused, his gaze lifting toward the darkened staircase. And soon the will itself must be found, deliberately. In the morning, Poirot said, Lady Evelyn rose as usual. She received her letters. We do not know all they contained, but one we may guess at. It concerned her finances. There was discontent in the household, no? Some expected much from her fortune. His gaze flicked to Reginald. The young man bristled. You make it sound as though money was all I cared for. Poirot's eyebrows lifted. Was it not, monsieur? Reginald flushed, muttering under his breath. Poirot continued smoothly. She considered her will. Perhaps she had already written a new one. Perhaps she intended to. But she thought of change. And change, mes amis, is danger when wealth is at stake. Poirot's eyes turned upon Harcourt. In the afternoon, she received her physician. Dr. Harcourt, you were in her study. You admired her fan, did you not? Harcourt stiffened. Yes. I merely observed its painting. A remarkable object, quite old, that is all. Poirot inclined his head. You held it in your hands. Yes, but for no more than a moment. Surely you don't suggest. Poirot lifted a hand. I suggest nothing. I merely state the sequence. Poirot's gaze softened as it fell upon Clara. Later, our devoted maid enters. She sees Lady Evelyn troubled, unlocking her drawer, removing papers. She believes these to be the will. Soon afterward, Clara, you bring the fan. Again, it passes through your hands. Clara nodded, her face pale. Poirot's mustaches twitched. And then Sir Reginald arrives. Angry words are heard. He threatens, but the quarrel ends with no violence. Lady Evelyn is resolute. Perhaps at that moment she hides away the new will. Perhaps she leaves it upon her desk. Wherever it lies, it vanishes afterward. Reginald leapt up. You make me sound like a brute. I never touched her will. Poirot's voice was calm, almost soothing. Then let us say, monsieur, that your temper was the thunder been earlier, when the fan passed, briefly, to another hand. His gaze swept the room, pausing meaningfully on Harcourt. The doctor snapped. This is monstrous. I had no cause to harm her. Poirot's voice was mild. No cause. And yet, if her will removed your handsome bequest, would you not find yourself diminished? Harcourt's face darkened, but he said nothing. Poirot drew himself up, fingers steepled. It is not brute force we seek, but the mind behind the act. To poison in such a way requires knowledge. Knowledge of chemicals, yes, but also of the victim's habits. Who knew she always touched the fan to her lips? Who knew the fan was her inseparable companion at night? Not many, mes amis. Very few indeed. Silence. Each face stiffened, eyes darting to the others. Poirot allowed the silence to stretch, then said softly, "There is one among you who possessed both knowledge and opportunity. And that one, mes amis, is nearer than you think." Japp stirred. "So you're saying you've solved it, Poirot?" Poirot smiled faintly. "Not yet, mon ami. The sequence, I see it now. The mind, I begin to glimpse it. But the hand that daubed the poison upon the painted surface, that we must still prove." Yvette's breath caught audibly. Reginald muttered a curse. Harcourt scowled, beads of sweat at his brow. Poirot looked at them all with grave composure. "Therefore, tomorrow I shall conduct a small experiment, one that will reveal the truth beyond denial. And when that truth is revealed, then justice will follow." He bowed his head slightly. "For Lady Evelyn Marchmont shall not rest in silence while her killer walks free." Poirot turned toward the door, signaling Japp to follow. As he reached the threshold, he paused, mustaches bristling with quiet intensity. "In the end, mes amis," he said, looking back at the assembled faces, "murder is not merely a matter of opportunity. It is a matter of character. And tomorrow we shall see which of you possessed the character to cloak death beneath the wings of a fan. Not dangerous, I assure you. It is merely, how do you say, an exercise for the little gray cells." He gestured to the table. Upon it lay the painted fan, its surface gleaming faintly in the light. Next to it, Poirot had placed several small dishes containing colored powders. "The fan," Poirot said softly. "Always the fan. It was with Lady Evelyn in her final hour. It was the means of her death. Yet, consider, why should a murderer choose such a weapon? So fragile, so uncertain. Unless..." He paused, letting his gaze sweep across them. The murderer knew precisely how Lady Evelyn would use it. Knew, in short, her habits. A faint stir went through the room. Poirot's eyes twinkled with suppressed intensity. "Therefore," he continued, "I shall ask each of you to demonstrate, with this fan, how you believe Lady Evelyn was accustomed to hold or employ it. Do not be nervous. There is no poison here. I have cleaned it most carefully, and what you see upon the table is no more than harmless chalk." Sir Reginald gave a short laugh. "Parlor tricks, Poirot. You can't expect to solve a murder with theatrics." Poirot inclined his head. "Sometimes, monsieur, the theatrics reveal the truth better than a confession." Poirot picked up the fan delicately and offered it first to Reginald. "Come, monsieur, show us." Reginald smirked but complied. He flicked the fan open and waved it vigorously before his face. "Like this, I suppose." She was always fanning herself, complaining of drafts. Poirot's eyes narrowed. "Yes, vigorous, but not quite the way of Lady Evelyn, perhaps." He reclaimed the fan and passed it to Yvette. "Et vous, mademoiselle?" Yvette took it with trembling fingers. She opened it with grace, fluttered it gently, and then rested it against her cheek. She liked the feel of it against her skin. She would sit like this, lost in thought. Poirot's head tilted. Ah, très bien. But perhaps not the whole truth. Seen her do it, once or twice. Poirot's mustaches quivered. Once or twice, perhaps. But you described it with confidence. Too much confidence for a casual glance. And you, above all, possessed the knowledge of poison subtle enough to coat the fan without leaving trace. Before Harcourt could respond, Poirot lifted a finger. But let us not forget the will. Lady Evelyn prepared a new one. Clara saw her with the papers. Yet when we searched, there was no will to be found. He turned toward the others, his voice deepening. Where is it? That, too, was the work of our murderer. Japp stepped forward. We turned that study inside out, not a trace. Poirot smiled faintly. Because, mon ami, the study hid its secrets well. Behind the lowest drawer of the escritoire, I discovered a false panel. And within it, ashes. The charred remains of papers, among them, just legible, the words, "This is the last will and testament." A gasp ran around the room. Yvette clutched her handkerchief tighter. Clara's face went white. Poirot's eyes grew hard. The murderer not only poisoned Lady Evelyn, but also destroyed her will, an act of desperation. Yet even fire cannot wholly consume the truth. Enough remains to prove that certain names were to be struck out. Harcourt's, and Reginald's too. Reginald leapt up. You can't prove I burned it. Poirot looked at him coolly. Non, monsieur. You had the temper, yes. But the opportunity? You left her in anger, but not with stealth. No, this was the work of one who returned quietly, after she was dead, to destroy the paper that condemned him. His eyes swung back to Harcourt, who had gone pale as ivory. The silence grew thick, oppressive. Harcourt shifted, his lips tightening. This is absurd. You weave fancies from gestures and ashes. Where is your proof? Poirot spread his hands. Proof, doctor? Proof is but the final straw. Protests and hurried denials. But Poirot stood serene, a little smile beneath his mustache, his eyes glittering with certainty. Chapter 10. The Denouement. The drawing room of Marchmont House had never felt so stifling. Heavy curtains were drawn, the fire hissed in the grate, and the portraits of stern Marchmont ancestors seemed to lean forward from their frames, as though they too awaited judgment. Hercule Poirot stood at the center, immaculate and composed, his hands folded neatly before him. Inspector Japp loomed nearby, his jaw set with anticipation. Around them the suspects gathered once more. Sir Reginald, restless and sour-faced. Yvette, pale and anxious. Clara Whitfield, subdued but resolute. And Dr. Harcourt, his expression a mask of chilly defiance. Mes amis, Poirot began softly. The time has come to draw aside the curtain. No more shadows, no more guesses. The truth, it stands before us. Clear, logical, inevitable. The hush deepened. Even the ticking of the mantel clock seemed to still itself. Poirot's gaze swept the assembly. First, let us consider motive. Sir Reginald, your temper is quick, your debts heavy. You quarreled with Lady Evelyn, yes, and she may well have struck you from her will. But murder? Non, monsieur. You have the passion, but not the subtlety. To daub poison upon a fan requires calm preparation, not a fit of rage. Reginald flushed scarlet but said nothing. Poirot turned to Yvette. And you, mademoiselle? The companion, the confidant. You resented Lady Evelyn's control, her criticisms, her fortune that did not pass to you. You had cause for bitterness, perhaps even for rebellion. But you lacked knowledge. You did not know of toxins, nor the precise habits of your mistress. Yvette's eyes glistened. I envied her, yes, but I loved her too. A dozen times a night. A surface laced with poison would do its work quickly and invisibly. He paused, mustaches bristling. Clara knew this habit, of course, but she lacked the knowledge of toxic powders. Dr. Harcourt possessed that knowledge, and in his eagerness yesterday he betrayed himself, demonstrating the very gesture he could only know if he had observed it closely, with purpose. Harcourt's voice rose sharply. I merely imitated. Anyone could. Poirot's eyes glittered. Non, monsieur. I asked each of you to show what you had seen. Only you and Clara knew the truth, and Clara had never spoken it aloud. Poirot moved to the table where the fan lay once more. He lifted it delicately with gloved hands. Last night, he said, I examined this fan with great care. Upon its painted surface I found faint traces of a crystalline substance, arsenical, prepared with cunning. And on the cuff of one coat, examined this morning, I discovered the merest dusting of the same residue. His gaze shot toward Harcourt. Your coat, doctor. A collective gasp filled the room. Harcourt blanched, his composure cracking. You planted it. This is trickery. Poirot shook his head. It is chemistry, monsieur. Simple, undeniable. And then, Poirot continued, his voice low. The will, burned, concealed, hidden in desperation. Who but the murderer would return to her study after the deed, search out the document, and consign it to ashes? Not Sir Reginald. He stormed away, too loud, too visible. Not Yvette. Her grief was real, her courage small. Not Clara. She would sooner die than betray her mistress's trust. No. It was you, doctor. You, who alone possessed both stealth and motive. He held up the scorched fragments in a paper folder. Here is your proof. Your inheritance vanished in ink, so you chose to erase it in fire. But you could not erase the truth. Poirot's voice rang with finality. Mesdames et messieurs, Mademoiselle Whitfield, Lady Evelyn had no truer friend than you. Guard her memory well. She is avenged. Clara wept softly, bowing her head. To Yvette, Poirot spoke kindly. Courage, mademoiselle. Your path is your own now, free from shadows. Seek peace, not envy. And to Reginald, with a raised brow, learn, monsieur, that fortune is not won by threats. Work, humility, honor, these, not inheritance, give dignity. Reginald muttered, chastened, and turned away. Poirot adjusted his cuffs, serene once more. He looked toward Japp, who lingered by the door. Come, mon ami, he said lightly. Our work here is done. Lady Evelyn sleeps, but the truth wakes. And the fan, the fan shall never stir poison again. They stepped into the cold morning air. The frost had melted, the lawns glistened with dew. Poirot paused upon the steps, gazing up at the gray sky. "Do you see, Jap?" he murmured. "Murder may cloak itself in beauty, in art, in loyalty even. But always it leaves a trace, a gesture, a habit, a speck of dust. That is enough for the little gray cells." Jap gave a grunt. "I'll say this, Poirot, you've done it again. Who'd have thought a painted fan could hide a killer's hand?" Poirot smiled faintly, his mustaches gleaming. "Who indeed, mon ami?" But in the end, the fan was like life itself, fragile, exquisite, yet stained by vanity. Fortunately, his eyes sparkled, there is always the order, the balance, the justice. And with that, they walked down the gravel path, leaving Marchmont House behind, its secrets laid bare at last.